Hello everyone! Today on Binky's Gaming Thoughts, I want to talk about my top 10 Dragon Age characters. So a few months ago I did my top 10 companions. So these are non-companion characters that fall into my top 10. And there were a few ties here and there. So I had to figure things out. This is my paper with it all. I used the same process that I used last time. So evaluating from 0 to 10 the story and background of the character. 0 to 10 the influence they have on magic and history. And then 0 to 10 the feels for me personally. And the story and background is also kind of like subjective as well. All right. Quick little shout out to our skeletal friend, Xenon. Can't really imitate his voice, but just because I feel as though there's more to him that we don't yet know about, as though who was he when he was alive, or what was he? Does he have a link to anything or any important type of people or other characters? And what is he? Who is he? And he seems kind of like some sort of big skeleton, like a giant, kind of like in the Frostback Basin. Sometimes when you walk around and you see a skeleton, it's bigger than the Inquisitor. So it's not a Titan, but what kind of being is that? You know, 70 times 70 men? No, those are the Titans. But anyway, quick little shout out to Xenon. And a lot of characters were close together in rating for the ones below my top 5. And I really had to think them through. So, number 10, Leandra Amel. So, while she doesn't bring much to the table in terms of influence on magic and history, she is the mother of Hawk. And she's in my opinion, she's a very well-developed character. Her backstory is touching. You know, mother who lost her husband, was a mage, and when you do the Legacy DLC, it adds to her as well as to Hawk and to Hawk's father. And losing a child to the Blight right at the start of the game, and then seeing another child either die or become a Grey Warden or Templar or Circle Mage. Leandra was actually tied with a few other characters: Dagna, Empress Celine, Josephine, and Krem. What made me choose Leandra at number 10 and to bump the other ones to number 11 was that it was the tragic end, because that part, it hits me right in the feels. So story and background, I gave her a 6 on 10. Influence to magic and history, 4 on 10, because she doesn't influence too much, but she is Hawk's mother. And feels, 7 on 10. Bringing her total to 17 on 30. Up at number 9, well, down at number 9. So we have a tie. And so I included these two characters at number 9 because I see them as kind of equal. So we have Jirian Alexius and Lord Seeker Lucius. So I guess you kind of see where I'm getting at with the equal sequel. So both characters, Lucius and Alexius, both Roman type names, they both play a pivotal role in the Mage Templar Rebellion and in the war against Corypheus. We must either fight one or the other before we confront Corypheus for the very first time at Haven, and both have allied themselves with the Elder One. The Elder One. thus contributing to the chaos. The difference in stats are between their backstory and their influence on magic and history, which is slightly different. Lucius has a bit more backstory, being the Lord's Seeker, with the Book of Truths that's later handed to Cassandra. While, however, it's Alexius who has a bit more influence, not because of his past thing, but given that he used to be Dorian's teacher, and Dorian becomes a companion, and it's a lot why Dorian is who he is and how he wants to change to Vinter because of what he saw Alexius do, so due to his relationship with him. So that's where the slight nuances, but they came to the same total for me. So 5 on 10 for story and background for Alexius, while 6 on 10 for story and background for Lucius, 7 on 10 for influence on magic for Alexius, while 6 on 10 for influence on magic and history for Lucius, and both of them 6 on 10 for the fields, which brings us to a total of 18 on 30. Number 8, a character who is not always existent in all playthroughs, but who I believe is important enough for me, Kieran. So he is Morgan's son, Flemeth's grandson. He's the grandchild of the woman who carries the spirit of an elven god, Mithal. Thus, he's linked somehow to Mithal and the elven gods too. So maybe he's going to play a role in that at some point later on. Who knows? He was born from the defeat of the archdemon Urthemiel from the Fifth Blight. A piece of an old god, even if a false god, a piece of an old god lives inside of him. Yet it is unknown how much influence he actually has or will have in the future, given we've only met him once. And he is such a young boy still. So how will that play a part later on? It will be interesting to see what part he plays in the future now that it was revealed that Flemeth carries Mithal, with everything that happened at the end, Flemeth being petrified. I don't think she's really dead and everything. So, you know, what role is Kieran really going to play? You know? And it's a shame that he's not all in all playthroughs, but he's a really interesting character for me, and I think there's a lot more to be discovered from him. Number 7, Cullen Rutherford. All right, so while we don't know much about him in the first 2 games, while we're playing the first 2 games, we discover more of him in Inquisition. We learned about his traumatic past and how that shaped his decision to quit Lyrium, to quit the Templar Order, you know, to turn away from the Templars, break free from his Lyrium addiction, thus opening the door for a new way to be a Templar, that repeated with new emphasis. You know, could Templars be as efficient and exist with similar powers without Lyria? Is it possible? He's not a companion, but just as romanceable. And a husband type Cullen is a very fun-loving Cullen to romance. He's very touching and sensitive, and I really like how they developed him in Dragon Age Inquisition. So I gave him a 7 on 10 for story and background, 6 on 10 for influence on magic and history, and 7 on 10 for the feels, which brings us to a total of 20. Number 6, Enchantment? Enchantment! That's right, Sandal Fedic. So I find that he is greatly underrated, underestimated, and Sandal probably falls on the, it seems to me as though he falls a bit on the autism spectrum somewhere. And I have, since I have a bit of knowledge on that because my brother's autistic. So Sandal, he's a savant. You know, he knows more about enchantments, probably more than even Dagna does. You know, he's a prophet. You know, he doesn't say much. He doesn't always seem, you know, he seems like the oddball, but there's something about him. He knows things. He understands things. He doesn't necessarily voice it. And when he says his prophecy, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? But boom, you know, like really, there's really more to Sandal, I believe, also. So many characters that I believe there's so much more to them. And I was so disappointed that he wasn't more present in Dragon Age Inquisition. But he predicted the events of Inquisition. The return and the rise of either Corypheus or Solus, however you want to interpret it. He talks about the sky opening up. He says the veil will be torn down. Is he predicting more blights? Is he predicting, you know, something to do with Achlathan or with Solus? I don't think it was just the events of Inquisition. I think there's a lot more to that. I want him in the next game. I want Sandal. BioWare, if you fall by any weird circumstance, chance on my video, and you're seeing this, I want Sandal in the next game. And more prophecies. There's just so much more to Sandal. He's just such a lovable character. So, +6 for story and background, +8 on influence on magic and history, and +7 on feels, which brings us to a total of 21. So number 5. Now we fall to the top 5. The Architect. So the Architect is the only other darkspawn like Corypheus we've met. So the only other Magister, first of all the first darkspawn. He wanted to destroy the old gods. He might not have remembered his ties to them, but he is the second one. If I recall correctly, Corypheus is the first, and he went to the Architect next, and then convinced all the others. So he did not remember the Black City. The claims that Corypheus makes tells us that the Architect is indeed another Magister from Tevinter, who took part in the ritual from the Canticle of Silence, associated with Uchthamil from the 5th Blight. Without him, entering the Golden City would not have been possible because it required all 7 of them. So I gave him +8 on story and background, 8 on 10, 8 for influence on history and magic, and +6 on feels, which brings us to a total of 22. Up at number 4, Abelas, the Elf of Sorrow, guardian of the Well of Sorrows, of the Temple of Mythal, one who should really be in the next game too. And let's make him a sad elf boyfriend. Let's make him romanceable. I wouldn't mind. So while we only meet Abelas briefly, he bears such a burden on his shoulders and carries so much history with him, all mostly linked to Mythal, which could otherwise have been lost. He guarded and protected the temple and thus led us to the Well of Sorrows, which bears great influence on us, regardless who drinks from it. He also seems to recognize solace in some way when they speak in Elven. If BioWare decides that Solace or Mythal's essence found Abelas and revived him for the playthroughs where he's dead, he could have survived getting killed in a way and just be sustained alive. And that could be an interesting story in the next Dragon Age if we encounter Abelas and he says, I was killed by Morgan, but the spirits of the Well of Sorrow, somehow because of his link to it, or essence of Mythal, or something, somehow he is kept alive. He is not truly dead, which would make him a companion even more interesting for all the possibilities. And so speaking with him, the dialogue would be different depending what you had done in the previous game, which would enrich the character even more. So I think he should be in the next Dragon Age game, Dragon Age 4. Who knows if he will be, but just saying. So +8 to story and background, +7 on influence on magic and history, and +8 feels, which brings us to a total of 23. Number 3, Inquisitor Ameridan. So the second blight had become while he was off fighting Hakon for Emperor Drakon. Had he been there, there may have been less animosity between humans and elves. The war would have looked very different. Ameridan was the first Inquisitor from the newly formed Chantry's Seekers of Truth and Templars. His mission influenced the events of the Second Blight, influenced the history between humans and elves, and finding him influenced the lost knowledge from those times, 9 ages later, you know? And his tale is heroic. Sad, but heroic. And when we play Jaws on Hakon, there's just so much more that I could say about this character because of his influence and his story. And I find it pretty rich. So +8 to story and background, 9 for influence on magic and history, bonus points for being the first Inquisitor, and +8 on feels, which brings us to a total of 25. Number 2. Behold, Corypheus, the Elder One, the first, the very first Magister to have heard the whispers of the old gods, the one who follows Dumat. He is the one who got all the other Magisters to join him for the ritual that takes place in the Canticle of Silence. He got the others on board and he led them to this ritual to enter. He led them to enter the Golden City, thus becoming the first of the first Darkspawn. He is the very first Darkspawn, and yet now he claims history has it all wrong and reveals harsh truths, earth-shattering revelations that will change Thedas forever. Not to mention creating armies of demons and Red Templars, contributing to the existing chaos in the Mage Templar Rebellion, you know, and everything he does in Inquisition. He is one of the biggest influence in all of Thedas history. Although he is the first, he is second on my list. at number 2, because we know who was created before humans were. So, +9 for story and background, +10 on influence on magic and history, and +8 feels. I love to hate him. And I love his theme because whenever he appears, like, it's so oomphy, you know? Corypheus's oomphy music makes Vader's oomphy music, like, makes Vader jealous of the oomphy music. Like, I thought I had an epic march whenever I walked into the room. Corypheus, when he walks into the room, it's, you know, goosebump stuff. So number 1, Flemeth/Mythal, because they go together. So Flemeth, as carrying the spirit of Mythal, who was created first, obviously. Mythal is the mother, and Solus refers to the Evanurus as his people's first. So sorry, Corypheus, you're not the first. Flemeth's background is rich with mystery and tragedy. The amplitude of the revelations she made weigh heavily on the knowledge and history of Thedas, as it confirmed the existence of the elven gods, even before Solus had revealed himself. And of course, you know that I believe Flemeth was already turning to stone when she was leaving the Fade before Solus petrifies her. I don't believe she's dead. That I believe Solus took her essence, but it's possible she is still alive, somehow preserved. And I have a video where I talk about that. She's escaped death before Dragon Age 2, So from a very, very killing blow happening in Origins. So who's to say she didn't escape death this time too? Mythal, by being the one who opposed the other Evanurus, as the voice of reason, the one whom they killed, has shaped the history of Thedas. Without her opposing them, without them killing her, without her death, Solus would not have done what he did. Or perhaps not exactly in that manner or order of events, or at that time. Without Mythal, Flemeth would not have been able to live so long after her own betrayal. And Flemeth exists almost eternally. So no Mythal, no Flemeth. No Flemeth, no Morrigan. No Morrigan, no Kieran. Flemeth and Mythal's spirits are linked. Solus might not have regained his strength as Fen'Harel without Flemeth and Mythal's essence that he was able to absorb. Mythal is as much a part of Flemeth as her own beating heart. So, +10 to story and background, +10 on 10 for influence to magic and history, and +9 feels, which brings us to a total of 29. Why didn't I give her 10, 10, 10? Why not 30? Because only one character fills that spot. And if I mix characters and companions, only one character can fill that number 1 spot. And we all know who that is. Obsessed? Much? Perhaps. I own it. We'll see in Dragon Age 4 which other characters pop up. My top 10 list might change. And there you have it, folks. Those were my top 10 Dragon Age characters. Let me know in the comments below your top 10 characters. And like this video if you like it. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, as this channel has so many Dragon Age related things and a few SWTOR and Mass Effect stuff too. BioWare stuff. And I'll see you all soon. Maseranas. Be sure to check out some of my other stuff. Gaming, drinks, parodies, and some random silly stuff. You can also join in on the fun on Patreon for some exclusive content. Thanks for tuning in.